do not go anywhere. I want to bring into the conversation with all of us Republican strategist John Thomas and Fox contributor Leslie Marshall. Good to see you guys. Starting with you, John Thomas, you know, we have been watching Donald Trump outline, I would argue, some strong policies, certainly when it comes to the economy, and his plan for lower taxes and less regulation are, by most standards, very, very strong signals for our economy going forward. Nonetheless, that's not what we've been talking about recently. Unfortunately, he keeps stepping in it with a variety of different topics. Is this a chance, an opportunity for him to really reset the tone? Because this, again, is an issue that Americans care so much about. Your thoughts?
Trish, this could be Trump's big moment. Every campaign, every winning campaign is fundamentally about us versus them. And if Donald Trump is able to refocus the American electorate to think that it is about America coming together to fight radical Islamic terrorists and end them and kill them once and for all, at the same time driving a contrast over the last 8 years and by extension Hillary Clinton's legacy over what we've been doing isn't working, and her plans going forward are the same that we've been doing.
In other words, this election should be a referendum on the failed policies of this past administration and, of course, the Clintons. Leslie, one would have thought Hillary Clinton would be a pretty easy candidate to beat. Her negatives are extremely high, but as you have cautioned all along, he had the propensity and the ability to get himself a little bit off track. Is there enough time? Can he change things beginning today?
No. In my opinion, no. The damage is done. A ban is not vetting. He has said so much negative rhetoric that has affected his reputation throughout the world that I hear from friends of mine that live in Dubai that they are taking down Trump billboards because he's building many buildings in that Muslim nation, by the way, and a lot of Muslims that are offended by the words he said don't want to work there. The bottom line is we need an international coalition to beat this enemy. And even though he wants to portray us and the president especially as having failed in our mission, that is not what U.S. command says, and that is not what the Iraqi forces say. People say look for an October surprise, and they think they're going to take Mosul from ISIS, which would be the last stronghold for them. They've lost over 50% of the ground in Iraq, and their finances have weakened. That does also, by the way, not address the radicalization through the internet. So today, I don't think he can talk about nuking ISIS. He can talk about being, you know, a strong arm with ISIS. But the reality is there's a lot of damage that's been done. And I don't think that the international community is going to say, oh, you know, you're bad. You didn't mean that. Let's move forward together.
KT.
You know, talking about the Central Command, I mean, we found out that, in fact, the intelligence reports coming out of the Central Command were skewed. That the political leadership told the intelligence professionals, no, don't say it that way, minimize the threat. So I'm really not sure that we can claim that this has been some great success against radical Islam, just the opposite. Let
me ask you, Ambassador, about the internet component to all this, as Leslie highlights. I mean, social media throughout the last 8 years has also exploded. So as much as we want to blame the Obama administration, and they deserve a lot of blame for the uprise of ISIS, we can also blame social media and perhaps the president for not going after social media more intensively. How do we start to change that? Because if we don't, the concern is this ideology just continues to spread.
It's a huge issue. Albert Wohlstetter, the late wonderful Albert Wohlstetter, wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal back in the mid-'80s about called "The Facts Will Make You Free," FAX. And what he meant is what happened. The Soviets had a terrible time keeping up with fax messages, and the combination of the AFL-CIO and the CIA getting fax machines to the Poles had a big impact on the end of the Cold War. The same thing had happened centuries before with the printing press and Gutenberg's Bible. If it weren't for the printing press, it would still be there in a few pages on the wall of the cathedral in 500 years, for 500 years. I think that technology changes things radically, and particularly any that's related to communications and that's related to something like what has happened with metadata and with Facebook and all of that. We're just in a completely different world. in terms of keeping up with what's going on, utilizing the technology, keeping the technology from being used against us. It's as if we had fought with bows and arrows for years, and somebody invented gunpowder, and we're now saying, how do you use that?
Just to point out to the viewer, Mike Pence there on stage addressing the crowd in Ohio, of course, ahead of Donald Trump's big speech. We are waiting on him right now. He'll be talking about how we defeat ISIS, a big moment for his foreign policy. I'm here alongside Ambassador James Woolsey, KT McFarland, and we have our political panelists with us as well, John Thomas and Leslie Marshall, staying on the social media aspect of this, because I look at it and I think about World War II and how we were finally able together with the Allies to crack Enigma, right, the code, and that was critical in terms of us winning. And, nowadays you got Facebook and Twitter and, other social media sites are enabling these jihadists to communicate in a code.
Yes.
Do we need to intervene there and say, look, guys, you're on our side or theirs?
Hey, look, I do not understand how there's a bunch of people in the Yemeni desert who are somehow outsmarting us. The people who created social media, like you said, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else, and somehow there's a handful of these people who are like so smart and so clever that they're outsmarting us in social media, and they're recruiting deep within the homeland of the United States. They're spreading the message throughout Europe. I don't get it. I think that whoever the next president is, go to Silicon Valley and say, we're either in this together or you're on the other side of this. How do we figure it out?
Up there just north of Washington at Fort Meade at the National Security Agency is the greatest collection of crafty hackers in the world. And we are not using them. We need to use them to disrupt the Russians, to disrupt ISIS, to cause all kinds of trouble for everybody who has been causing trouble for us, the Chinese stealing our technology. We need to cause trouble for them and then turn up the gain by a factor of 100 or so, and not, and this is very hard for the Obama administration, not say a damned word.
Yeah, do it, exactly.
Spoken by an ex-CIA guy. John Thomas, is this in part why Silicon Valley is so resistant to Donald Trump? Because he might actually demand more from the likes of these tech companies?
I mean, I think that's first of all, some of the tech companies definitely skew far to the left, so I think that they're just not ideologically aligned with Donald Trump. But that is right. Donald Trump doesn't want to let the terrorists use our own technology against us. And let me say, the fact that Hillary Clinton, let's go back to this email scandal, the fact that she and her team felt that it was okay and secure to use a private email server that the FBI Director Comey said was very likely hacked. We want her in the Oval Office with things that are of the highest classification levels. I think she's disqualified herself to dealing with terrorist threats.
Ambassador Woolsey, your thoughts?
Bill Casey, when he was Director of Central Intelligence, and Ronald Reagan came up with a wonderful scheme. The Soviets were stealing technology from us that related to particularly the natural gas pipelines. Instead of stopping it, Casey figured out how to use some of his people at the CIA to fiddle around with the technology and let the Soviets steal it. And then some years, 2 or 3 years later, the pipeline in the Soviet Union started to explode. Boom, boom, boom.
Wow.
Why? Because they stole what we had put together for them to steal. It's called jiu-jitsu.
So we're 3 steps ahead, right?
Exactly.
And right now we're, I don't know, 3 steps behind.
What we're
maybe
doing
30.
now is building fences. We're building walls. We're behaving as if we were hundreds of years out of date. You got to go on the offense.
And sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Absolutely.
Look, what do all of our enemies have in common? They build cyber walls. They don't let anybody see what we could do. Tear down those cyber walls and then let their own people deal with their
Churchill
leadership.
loved to quote that in war, and we're at war, in war, truth is so important, it must always be protected by a bodyguard of lies. That's what we've got to do.
Leslie Marshall, we've heard a lot of great ideas here from the panel today. It's not clear that Hillary Clinton is capable of defeating ISIS because she won't even address it for what it is. She won't call this radical jihadism. She won't call this radical Islam. She's more concerned with being politically correct and more concerned with bringing more more Syrians here to this country, then perhaps we can really properly vet. How does she get around that? Because I think that's a political message that's going to be dangerous for her.
I don't think what we call it really matters, and I know people are really hung up on that. Hillary Clinton has actually, in fact, just a couple of months ago, referred to it as radical jihad. She has said radical Islam, and ISIS did not, there wasn't a big bolt of lightning that came down from the sky and struck them dead. With regard to this group, what we're also not considering is the
I'm going to have to jump in, Leslie, because Donald Trump has taken to the stage. Let's listen, everyone, his speech on how to defeat ISIS right now.